In this podcast episode, Shahed Ghoreishi, a former press officer in the Near Eastern Affairs (NEA) Bureau of the U.S. State Department, provides an insider's perspective on the intricate and troubling dynamics within the department regarding U.S. foreign policy, especially as it relates to Israel, Palestine, and the broader Middle East. Having been involuntarily removed from his position just weeks prior, Ghoreishi pulls back the curtain on the internal power struggles, policy manipulation, and questionable directives shaping America's stance on one of the most contentious geopolitical issues of our time. His account sheds light both on the real puppet masters influencing the State Department and the unsettling developments concerning the future of Gaza and the West Bank. Ghoreishi began his tenure at the State Department in September 2024 as a press officer within the NEA Bureau, responsible primarily for preparing spokespeople for daily press briefings and drafting press guidance, official responses to media inquiries that embody cleared and approved lines reflecting U.S. policy. The Near Eastern Affairs Bureau broadly covers the Middle East, stretching from Morocco to Iran, incorporating regions typically divided into sectors like Israeli-Palestinian affairs, the Arabian Peninsula, and North Africa. Ghoreishi was unexpectedly assigned to the highly sensitive Israeli-Palestinian desk, a role of intense scrutiny due to the nature of the conflict and the volume of media attention it attracts. His day-to-day work involved not just relaying official policy, but often navigating complex political minefields, crafting language designed to preserve diplomatic agility while balancing numerous equities within the department. He described his role as stylistic, where the precise wording could have outsized implications, especially on such a volatile issue. Ghoreishi detailed the bureaucratic process for approving press lines, which involved multiple layers of desk officers, NEA leadership, and ultimately filtering through the seventh floor at State, meaning offices close to Secretary Rubio and the Deputy Secretary. Despite this, Ghoreishi was often caught between competing internal interests and politically motivated agendas. One of the most striking revelations was the outsized influence of David Milstein, the senior advisor to Ambassador Mike Huckabee at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. Milstein, described as a political operative with prior experience working for Senator Ted Cruz, and who is notably the stepson of conservative commentator Mark Levin, wielded power far beyond his official title. Ghoreishi recounted how Milstein aggressively edited official press documents, pushed through statements aligned tightly with an extremely pro-Israel agenda, and escalated issues directly up to senior staff on Secretary Rubio's team. Milstein's interventions often skewed official messaging, inserting provocative biblical terms such as Judea and Samaria in lieu of the standard diplomatic reference to the West Bank, a deliberate linguistic choice signaling support for Israeli territorial claims and undermining Palestinian legitimacy. Ghoreishi emphasized that this was not simply an isolated freelance effort, but part of a broader pattern of internal pressure coming from the embassy in Jerusalem, backed by sympathetic hardline policymakers in Washington. This pressure bypassed normal State Department protocols, creating an environment where political aides with limited diplomatic rank exercised control over messaging and policy direction. Crucially, Ghoreishi explained how several lines he drafted, which reflected what he understood to be official positions, were censored or removed. For example, a statement explicitly opposing forced displacement of Palestinians, phrased as rejecting ethnic cleansing, was cut despite being rooted in prior quotes from President Trump and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Rather than affirming opposition to forced displacement, the approved message was reduced to vague standard lines about not discussing private diplomatic conversations or deflecting to Israel. This editing occurred despite Ghoreishi following all clearance procedures, and he later faced questions and pushback about where he had gotten that line. No one disputed its substance, yet it was deemed unacceptable. Similarly, Ghoreishi's attempt to include basic human decency, such as extending condolences for the deaths of journalists killed in Gaza, was met with suspicion and admonishment. His supervisors suggested concern over the journalists' affiliations, despite the irrelevance of such distinctions when expressing sympathy for civilians lost in conflict. The final straw came with attempts to soften and clarify language related to stability in the West Bank, a region with complex and contested governance. When Ghoreishi removed Milstein's insertion praising a politically charged visit by former Speaker Johnson to Israeli settlements, using ideological and divisive language, he found himself excluded from consequential discussions and quickly targeted by higher-ups for dismissal. Ghoreishi was abruptly fired without explanation or formal procedural due process, underscoring a broader chilling effect imposed on staff who attempted to apply norms of accuracy, human rights, or balanced diplomacy. His removal was reportedly orchestrated through direct intervention from senior members of Secretary Rubio's staff, including associates with Heritage Foundation ties, known for hawkish foreign policy views. The narrative makes it clear that the puppet masters influencing U.S. State Department policy on Israel and Palestine operate in a shadowy network of political operatives working closely with the embassy in Jerusalem. Individuals like David Milstein and allies within the Secretary of State's office effectively determine what official messages go out, how the Palestinian issue is framed, and which diplomatic maneuvers are pursued. This influence operates above and beyond traditional diplomatic channels, sidelining professionals who seek to uphold established U.S. policy and prevent overt partisanship. Emblematic of this influence is Ambassador Huckabee himself, whose public rhetoric has at times been inflammatory, such as endorsing the Dresden bombings of World War II, a comparison he applied without sensitivity to attacks on civilians in Gaza, and publicly attacking the United Kingdom's Prime Minister over criticism of Israeli actions. These actions, both Ghoreishi and the interview host stress, undermine the United States' global standing and damage relationships with vital allies. Ghoreishi expressed deep concern and uncertainty about the U.S. government's real intentions for the Palestinian populations in Gaza and the West Bank. He warned that signs pointed toward an emerging plan of forced displacement, ethnic cleansing under another name, with Palestinians being pressured or coerced to relocate to other countries, including various African nations such as South Sudan or Libya. These discussions reportedly take place at high government levels, though are shrouded in secrecy, revealing a disturbing willingness to engineer demographic changes at the expense of millions. The annexation of the West Bank loomed as a grim reality, with Israel moving towards asserting full control over Area C and other Palestinian-controlled territories without clarifying the legal or political rights of Palestinians living there. Ghoreishi underscored the risks and instability such actions invite, highlighting how U.S. diplomatic capital is squandered in supporting these maneuvers that degrade regional stability, strain relations with key partners like Jordan and Egypt, and fuel long-term cycles of violence. Throughout the discussion, Ghoreishi's abiding concern was the evident subordination of American interests to an unwavering pro-Israel lobby and political faction inside the State Department. This dynamic, which he described as America Last, sacrifices U.S. global leadership, diplomatic credibility, and adherence to principles of human rights and international law to advance an agenda that is often both radical and counterproductive. He lamented the irony that the Trump administration, initially seen by some as a potential harbinger of America First foreign policy, emphasizing peace and less intervention, devolved into a vehicle for entrenched neoconservative and partisan interests controlling Middle East policy. Ghoreishi fears that this trajectory risks alienating the Republican Party's base, increasing domestic polarization, and entrenching a foreign policy of endless war and misaligned priorities.